Dear delegates, all dignitaries present here today, faculty, staff, and students, good morning. A very special welcome to the Common Induction Program and the Foundation Day of Symbiosis School of Economics and Symbiosis Statistical Institute. We are truly honored to have with us today Dr. Vidya Yeravdekar, Principal Director of Symbiosis Society and Pro-Chancellor of Symbiosis International University. Dr. Rajni Gupte, Vice Chancellor, Symbiosis International University. Dr. Jyoti Chandiramani, Director of Symbiosis School of Economics and Dean of Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences. Dr. Sharvari Shukla, Director, Symbiosis Statistical Institute. And, of course, it is our privilege to have amongst us our chief guest, Padma Vibhushan, Shri Montek Singh, Ahluwalia. I would request all dignitaries on the dais to light the lamp that will brighten up our paths and lead us all to a brighter future.
Asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya Sarvesham swastir bhavatu Sarvesham shantir bhavatu Sarvesham purnam bhavatu Sarvesham mangalam bhavatu Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu.
We are honored to have with us Dr. Rajni Gupte, Vice Chancellor, Symbiosis International University. Rajni ma'am is a distinguished academician, having taught at many foreign universities and has been actively engaged in higher education for more than 4 decades, both as a professor and as a researcher. She was a founding member of the Symbiosis Institute of International Business in 1992, and as the director of the institute between 2004 and 2012. Her leadership led the institute to be established as one of the top-ranking business schools in India. She is an independent director on the governing body of NSDL and L&T Finance Holdings, along with being on the international trade panel of CII. She is a member of the WTO committee, the Chemtech World Expo, committees of the government of Maharashtra, committees appointed by the UGC, and on working groups on higher education. She is also a member of Niti Aayog consultation group of experts for the education vertical. She was one of the top 10 women selected from across Asia to attend the Women in University Administration program sponsored by the US Department of State. Dr. Gupte has received several awards for her outstanding contribution to education, which include the Lokmat National Education Leadership Award in 2015, the Swayam Siddha Puraskar 2015 by Lions Club of Pune Elite, the Think Pure Award by the Think Pure Social Welfare Foundation in 2016, the iconic Leader Award, Creating a Better World for All at the Women Economic Forum 2017. She was the recipient of the Visionary Edu Leader of India at the hands of Shri Pranab Mukherjee, former President of India, for being an institution builder. Please welcome Dr. Rajni Gupte, ma'am.
Good morning. Our esteemed chief guest this morning, Shri Montek Singh Ji Ahluwalia, Dr. Vidya Yeravdekar, the Pro-Chancellor of the Symbiosis International University, Dr. Jyoti Chandiramani, the Director of the School of Economics, Dr. Sharvari Shukla, the Director of the Symbiosis School of Statistics, my dear students from both the batches of the School of Economics as well as the Statistical Institution, I extend to all of you a very hearty welcome. First of all, let me congratulate each and every one of you for having made it to the Symbiosis schools. I'm sure that there was intense competition and you have excelled, and that's why you are here. So my compliments to each and every one of you. You know, every induction ceremony is a very, very special day for you as well as for us. We realize that when young people decide to join Symbiosis, they have multiple options. But when they choose to come here, it is largely because of what they hear about Symbiosis. I'm sure you've done a lot of research, a lot of work about the school that you have joined. But I think I must tell you a little more about the university that you have joined. The university that you have joined is a university that was set up in 2002 and is a multidisciplinary university. So in addition to the Faculty of Humanities that all of you belong to, we have the Faculty of Law, Management, Engineering, Faculty of Health and Medical Sciences, Computer Studies. So that's the breadth of programs that we have at the university. We have over 90 programs being offered at the undergraduate, postgraduate, as well as at the PhD level. We are spread across the country. Pune, of course, has the largest contingent of institutes, but we have a presence in Bangalore, Hyderabad, Noida, Nasik, and Nagpur. So when you hear or you see, as you land in Pune, from the airport, you can see Symbiosis. So very many people tell me that, you know, you seem to be all over the city. Yes, we indeed are all over the city. And of course, the reason was we started in the city center. This, of course, was not enough as we grew, and therefore different campuses were set up. And we have a campus at Hinjewadi here, at Viman Nagar, and of course the university headquarters at Lovely, which I'm sure you'll have seen and will visit sometime during your tenure at the university. What does Symbiosis give you which is different from what other institutions give? I think education, more or less, would be roughly the same everywhere. You would have very, very dedicated teachers giving you the kind of knowledge that will help you in the years to come. That, I think, most universities would do. What is special about us is the connect with the industry. I think we make sure that each one of you does not remain confined to what is taught in a classroom. Your connection with the industry, your connection with what happens in the real world outside, through a host of activities that are planned by the directors and your faculty, is something that adds an edge to your education. In addition to that, I think the very strong commitment to the society that we have, the community engagement in which all of you will be involved, is something that we feel is a very, very integral part of the education at Symbiosis. I think each and every activity that your directors will plan for you will have a reason. So I'll urge all of you to play active part in all the activities. Make sure that you benefit from the years that you spend with us. Make good friends, have fun, but also make sure that you identify your own goals and move towards them. My very best wishes. I know we are all eager to listen to the rest of the speakers. So my very best wishes to each and every one of you. And Mr. Montek Singh, thank you so much for gracing this occasion. We are indeed honored. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Vidya Yerevdekar is the Principal Director of Symbiosis Society and Pro-Chancellor of Symbiosis International University. She holds a postgraduate degree in medicine, a degree in law, and a PhD in internationalization of higher education in India. She has numerous research publications to her credit and has also authored several books. She has been a facilitator of innovative approaches to higher education in India through her association with the UGC, the Central Advisory Board of Education, and the Indian Council for Cultural Relations. She has been appointed as a member of the expert group on global outreach of higher education to implement the National Education Policy 2020. Vidya ma'am is a chairperson of the FICCI Committee on Higher Education, where she's serving her 3rd term. She's also the vice president of Maratha Chamber of Commerce, Industries and Agriculture, along with being a member of India Brand Equity Foundation Trust, set up by the Ministry of Commerce and Industries, Government of India, to promote the Brand India label in overseas markets. She's a member of many corporate bodies like the FICCI, CII, Maratha Chamber of Commerce, Industries and Agriculture, and also non-profit organizations like H.K. Firodia Foundation, India International Center, and Pune International Center, and the list goes on. Dr. Vidya's hard work has won her numerous awards and accolades. Her continuous endeavor to innovate and initiate has helped Symbiosis attain its present respect and admiration. Dr. Vidya is now committed to shaping higher education globally through her extensive work in the field of internationalization of higher education. Please welcome Dr. Vidya ma'am to the podium.
The chief guest for today's induction ceremony, Shri Montek Singh Ahluwalia ji, my colleagues on the dais, faculty members, and my dear wonderful students, bright faces that I see here early morning. And I hope we can make your faces brighter. Today is a very important day for the Symbiosis School of Economics and the Symbiosis Statistical Institute. One, of course, because it is the induction day where you're meeting us for the first time. I'm sure you've already joined the institution. You may have started your lectures, but you meet the university authorities on the day of the induction. Unfortunately, Dr. Muzumdar sir couldn't be here today, but I'm sure we'll find another occasion for him to interact with you. We are indeed excited, maybe more than you, because we have Shri Montek Singh Ahluwalia ji, a person who we respect and revere at Symbiosis. He's been associated with Symbiosis directly and indirectly for several years. In fact, he was the one who inaugurated the Symbiosis School of Economics and thereby, of course, the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences. But more than him, I would say, his late wife, Ishar Ahluwalia ji, who I respected and revered, and I would always visit her whenever I went to Delhi, is someone who remains still close to our hearts, because there were so many initiatives that she initiated at Symbiosis, whether it was the Symbiosis Waste Management Resource Center or even the Symbiosis Center for Urban Studies. Because of our several conversations with her, directly and indirectly, of course, these institutions and centers were started, but I'm sure from up there, she still keeps blessing us. And sir, we hope that you continue to bless us the way you did for so many years. Today is a very important day in every student's life. Because you have joined one of the prestigious School of Economics and the Statistical Institute, the prestigious Symbiosis International University. And of course, because you've come through a very, very rigorous selection process, as the Vice Chancellor very rightly said. So we have more than 100,000 students who appear for our entrance exams, and a few hundreds get selected, and these are the talented lot that is in front of us. You also have excellent faculty members who would teach you, many of them sitting here in the audience, and of course they impart the best curriculum, a very highly internationalized curriculum, a curriculum that will not just enhance your knowledge, but also give you jobs and make you not just citizens of this country, but global citizens. But for each one of you here as students, you have to take something more than what is taught to you in classrooms. And Symbiosis provides you this beyond classroom education. There is so much learning that happens beyond classrooms that it is for students to actually take what we give. Whether it is the Center for International Education, which is our international office, which has several collaborations with almost 80 plus universities. You need to find those out. You need to reach out to the international office. You, of course, have a faculty who looks after the international collaborations. But nevertheless, as students, you need to reach out and find out more so that when you all are here for 3 years or 4 years, you can get to travel to a university, get some knowledge there and come back on a semester exchange program, or be talented enough to take a scholarship under the Global Immersion program that we offer. So as I said, several initiatives on internationalization. We have several foreign students who actually study on this campus. May not be in your class, but could be in another discipline, but learning and studying on this campus. Reach out to these students and make friends, because you will not get to make friends of foreign students in other places. Symbiosis hosts students from 85 different countries. So imagine a bond and friendship that you create here at Symbiosis will stay for your life. And if you really want to visit a foreign country, there couldn't be anything better than just making friends with a student from the Gambia, or a student from Chad, or from Ethiopia, or someone from Far East, someone from Australia. So we have so many students from so many countries that it would be so nice for you to understand their cultures, understand their regions, and of course connect with them. And likewise, you have students from so many states, in fact, all states of India. So don't restrict yourself to just, talking the same language. So you're with students from, say, Andhra Pradesh because you come from there, or maybe Punjab because you come from there. In fact, reach out and make friends with students from another state. Again, for a selfish reason, you can just go and visit that state, stay in the house of that student, but more importantly, try and understand the culture and region of that part of India. Because this is what will actually build your personalities, and this is what happens to students from Symbiosis. As we always say, that when students pass out of the portals of this university, why do they create their own identity, and why do they have a specific Symbiosis attribute to them? It is because of this kind of cultural sensitization, a very secular environment, an ecosystem that helps you to understand different cultures, different regions, that actually builds up your personality apart from gaining knowledge of economics or statistics or any other subject. As the Vice Chancellor said, we have so many multidisciplinary courses to offer you. You all are one of the luckiest batch, because you are the first batch of the National Education Policy that was rolled out by the Government of India in 2020 to be implemented from this academic year. So you have joined the 4 years undergraduate program, of course, with an exit option after 3 years, but a multidisciplinary curriculum, which means you can actually choose your subjects, go on to another campus to go and study that subject. It could be ranging from fashion design to psychology to business studies to maybe just waste management that you want to work on, or urban studies. Anything that is on offer to you as a multidisciplinary program, you can actually take. So you are a very, very lucky batch, because this is a totally different curriculum that is being on offer to you, which wasn't for other students earlier. But try and make the most of whatever is offered to you by this university, by the schools of Economics and Statistical Institute, because finally, you are the one who's going to decide your destiny. So while the university offers you so much, it is for you to take as much as possible so that you shape your own characters and personalities to not just become better human beings, better citizens of this country, but of course, becoming better global citizens. So I wish you all the very best. We all wish you a healthy and memorable years ahead while you all are at Symbiosis. Again, this is a health promoting university, and we hope to see each one of you in the gyms or doing yoga or aerobics or just taking a sport, because unless you're healthy, as a medical doctor, I can say this with great conviction, that unless you're healthy and you keep your mind and body healthy, you will not be able to perform. So once again, wish you all the very best and welcome you to this large Symbiosis family. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. On behalf of Symbiosis School of Economics and Symbiosis Statistical Institute, we take this opportunity to pay our tribute to Dr. Shir Judge Ahluwalia. We are going to have a small video to begin. We are now going to release the book in honor of Dr. Isharjaj Ahluwalia, which has been edited by Dr. Radhika Kapoor. I would now like to welcome Dr. Jyoti Chandiramani, Director of SSE and Dean of Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, to share her words.
Good morning to the dignitaries on the dais. Shri Montek Singh Ahluwalia ji, our Pro-Chancellor, Dr. Vidya Yerwadikar, our Vice-Chancellor, Dr. Rajni Gupte, my fellow colleague, Sharvari Shukla ji, Director of Symbiosis Statistical Institution. A very emotional morning for me, for a number of reasons. And those reasons are, one, you just saw Ishar ma'am's felicitation and the way she was here for an induction program years back. Setting up the Symbiosis Center for Waste Resource Management was her idea to us, which we took up very seriously. And the other one was, she actually came to hear our students present on the symbiosis, on the waste management projects. And Dr. Rajni ma'am, do you remember you were there at that very event? There are pictures of that. And a really a large source of inspiration. So when I joined SSE, I decided I would move away from foreign direct investments, which was my PhD, and move towards urban development, because my PhD was on passenger vehicle segment. And I said, this country is going to choke in 2009. And then when I started reading, the first report I came up was with the high-powered expert committee report written by Dr. Ishar ma'am. And I think that's still a matter of our textbooks and references when we teach urban development in class. So I think we can just stand up for 1 minute, to pay tribute to ma'am. May Ishar ma'am continue to inspire us, and we do what she has left in the urban spaces for the betterment of India as a nation and the growth of the cities. Thank you, Janardhan. Thank you, Shilpi. For my presentation, we have a very little time to talk about the journey of SSE over the last 16 years. And I remember sitting by that door over there on the left-hand side on the 1st of August, 2008. And Sir was lighting the lamp over here at the School of Economics, inaugurating the school with Dr. Vidya ma'am, Dr. Mazumdar sir, the then Vice Chancellor. We can even see Ram Jethmalani ji, B.G. Deshmukh ji, and it was a galaxy of art, of academicians and people who really propagated and encouraged this school to be set up. I was sitting there and I was wondering, oh, what a lovely institution, and I was head of the economics department. Little did I know that 2 years later, I would be here. And so here I am, justifying my stand and taking forward this journey of SSE from 1st August 2008. As we strive towards creating equilibrium, hoping to create economists of tomorrow who are made here, because I feel there's an economist in each one of us. Moving on, a journey of programs, evolutions, rigor, the word that I'm very fond of, and I keep saying that how we moved from a 200 credit to 150 credit to 144, to a BSc economics to a BSc honors, and now we have 5 specializations in economics. How we moved from 82 students to over 800 students. Let me tell you, it's not easy to get students for economics because over 1,100 universities, over 45,000 colleges offer economics, and then to be able to survive this monopolistic competitive world, we can only do it with product differentiation. All of you as economists would know what I'm talking about, and how we all have to do everything perfectly to stay there and to be there. As we move ahead, we have followed this 5, I call it the Panchatattvas. And what are these Panchatattvas? You know, the RPI model, which is very much there in the NAC, in the UGC, NIRF, as well as the QS rankings, etc. Academics, research, placement, internationalization, enhanced engagements, and so the journey keeps going on. We won't reach where we have without the young soldiers, I feel the brigadiers, the majors, the generals who are in the classroom, who really inspire you every day. I keep reading some, LinkedIn posts about how inspired you get by your teachers, and I'm so happy because it's they who have created the institution. It's you as students who do us proud, and our teachers who have in their class, through the various credits, taken things forward. And of course, what are the bullet points for it? You can see them there. We cannot afford to not be innovative. We cannot afford not to have technology, experiential learning, critical thinking. And all this is, of course, going to lead to lifelong learning. Adapting, having the right attitude, and of course, the ability, the 3 A's that I'm very fond of. One of the things I have to tell you is that all these pictures are real pictures with our real students over here, all right? So they are nothing fictitious which we pick up from, because I was very keen that we really recreate SSE the way it really is. And I think it's a beautiful place to be. The research that we focus on, right on top is there, urban studies. In fact, the Symbiosis Center for Urban Studies, which got created, it's like as if it's a baby of SSE. And we are joined together by the hip. You really can't separate the two. And urban studies, and I think everybody knows, because each one of you would have done some project in urban before you have graduated. International trade, which is also our specialization, development studies, financial economics, our 4th specialization, behavioral and experimental. Our students do a lot of dissertation because this has its root in development economics. And of course, we have our centers which are helping us in whatever we do, the activities, projects, workshops, roundtable. Each specialization is supposed to have a roundtable every year. Roundtable of experts who come and speak. Invariably, out of the 5, we are able to do 2 because there is so much of activity that we have to space them out. And you can see the Center for Academic Writing, Quantitative Learning, and Behavioral and Experimental Economics. This particular slide makes me, I'm so sorry, I went back. This particular slide makes me feel I remember in 2017, SDGs had just started, and we had come up with our conference. And this conference was the beginning of our collaborations, and how and with whom, with UNDP, with Niti Aayog, with NABARD, with Institute of Human Development, with ILO now, with RIS. Sir, with ICRIAR, I met Ishar ma'am over there, and we had FICO, as well as Transforming India Strategies for Sustainable Development, with partnership from all these particular think tanks, institutions of Delhi, the most reputed ones, Macquarie. And I remember Dr. Vidya ma'am even introducing us to Asia Europe Foundation. And This story has a lot to tell, right from Yuri from UNDP to Sachin Chaturvedi from RIS to Rajat Kathuria of ICRIAR, Satoshi Sasaki from ILO, the various CGMs at NABARD, because NABARD has really been a great partner for us, and Sajid Chinoy from the corporate world. It just went on with all those conferences. You can see the projects and consultancies. I'm going to speed this because we will give all our dignitaries on the dais a copy of our presentation so that it moves on. But we have had large amount of research and consultancies, and presently we've had almost 6 MOUs tied up with various districts of Maharashtra to take part in the district development strategic plan. I think it's a great opportunity for School of Economics to be a part of this journey for Maharashtra's visioning. And then comes the placements, and you know what are the activities, the interventions, where our students go, from data analytics to think tanks to market research. And there is a long journey that you can see that happens. And ma'am, while we are here, the 2 latest, without mentioning some students, it would really be incomplete. Dr. Vidya ma'am, you had given a special fund to Bhavani, who had gone for an international conference. And she didn't, from there, today she has now moved to Harvard to do her master's in public policy. And she wrote to me and she said to say a special thank you to you, because it was all this that was on her CV, which took her from SSE to Harvard, in a class of 80 where there are people from 35 countries. That's exactly the dream we are hoping we are going to recreate someday. But yes, we have a class of sometimes 16 people from 15 states. So it's in a different way. And the journey goes on for various students. Internationalization is Dr. Vidya ma'am and Dr. Mujumdar's, the very genesis of Symbiosis International University and Symbiosis Society comes from the concept of internationalization. And it goes beyond all this. We have, in fact, with us, our faculty who have done us proud, our students who have done us proud, going to various international universities. And then I remember Bristol University getting in touch with us because they had a couple of our students and they said, look, we'd like to have a tie-up with you because we're very happy with your students. And similarly with Houston University, where one of our students is doing a PhD, which is fully funded. And then they wrote to us that if you have any other such recommendations, please get back to us. So these may be anecdotal evidences, but it is an organic growth of an institution which speaks for itself as time goes by. And before I move on to enhance engagement, I'd also like to place on record some of my own faculty who have had large amount of, what you would say, contributions in the field of internationalization. For example, Dr. Sudeepa ma'am is Fellow of Higher Education Academy of UK. Dr. Ranjan Das has written a World Bank working paper. We've had Kalyan Shankar go on a fellowship to Oxford University. And the list goes on, but just I thought I would highlight a couple of them. Our engagements, you can see, we've already talked about them. And as we move on, the diversity is already known. Large number of countries, large number of cities, large number of states and union territories. And then I called Professor Tendulkar the distinguished professor of Symbiosis School of Economics. Because in his Chhatra Chhaya, we've had so many people who have come and delivered wonderful guest lectures. And this year, we are going to have the 10th such lecture to be delivered by Renana Jabwala, a lady who has done brilliant work in the field of gender and inclusion and poverty. And once this 10th year gets over, we will come up with a 10-year book with all the chapters and all the writings of the people who have contributed. So right from Maitresh Ghatak to Anil Bera to Kaushik Basu to Sita Prabhu, Sanjay Reddy, and it goes on. We also instituted a very important event which began locally, then went to all Pune and then to all India, and COVID taught us that it could go all over the world. And so we've had the Economist of the Year instituted, where students from all over the world now take part in this particular competition, touching upon very topical topics each year. And these are very fine, they are debated and thought of very well. And of course, students, it's all about you. We are here to serve you. And it's not just the classroom, but outside the classroom. The color collage that we can get out here, looks so brilliant. And all the clubs and activities, a democratic framework of elections, clubs that will survive if there are activities, and clubs that will not when there aren't any. You play a very important role. And we could only reach all this with Team SSE. Yesterday, Ajit Ranade, the Vice Chancellor of Gokhale Institute, said, Jyoti, you have 2 teams, 2 cricket teams at SSE. I said, no, sir, I have 5, because I have 55 people in my institution. So thanks to the team that works so well, and quality, as we always say, is an outcome of hard work. And the journey actually has just begun. Because as Robert Frost says, you just have to, that the roads may have, you may have come to the roads, but the journey has begun. And the journey has begun where we have miles to go before we sleep. Thank you.
I would like to call Dr. Sharvari Shukla, Director of Symbiosis Statistical Institute, to share the report with us.
Thank you, Dr. Sudeepa. Respected Chief Guest, Sri Montek Singh Ahluwalia ji, our own Pro-Chancellor, Dr. Vidya ma'am, Vice Chancellor ma'am, Dr. Rajni Gupte, our Dean ma'am, Dr. Jyoti, all our invited well-wishers, distinguished academicians, my colleagues and students, very happy morning to each one of you. This is just the small story of 5 years of birth of very premium institute called Symbiosis Statistical Institute. So I'm going to narrate a small thing. So sitting in the office of Symbiosis Institute of Health Sciences building was a young girl completely engrossed in her research work with very usual habit of putting her mobile on silent. My mentor came running to inform me that, she has missed the call, which turned out to be a call from Office of Honorable Chancellor Sir Dada, wanting to meet her urgently. So stepping into the office, she saw piles of papers flooding Dr. Muzumdar sir's desk based on statistics and the competitors. After getting to know about her qualification, sir asked her opinion about starting with the statistics course. Knowing that there was only one dedicated statistical institute at that time, girl explained her desire to start with master's program and submitted a note to sir, as she believed it would be initially served better as an institute for postgraduate program. Though we all know that Shakespeare wrote, a rose by any other name would smell just as sweet, but our leader was ready with sweet naming ceremony, as they were aware that meaning behind the name would shape our entire brand. Also, they were very well aware that the geography decides the strategy. So within fraction of second after submitting the note, Sir has finished with the naming ceremony of Symbiosis Statistical Institute and SSI bond. You will not be surprised, but right from the meeting to submission of note to birth of naming ceremony, whoosh, all has happened with only one bright afternoon, and that is on 21st of March 2018. Within few hours of labor, SSI has born with lot of homework. So, as SIU is proud to have a galaxy of dreamers who leave their indelible mark in numerous ways on various aspects of the society towards societal improvement, and thus SIU has added another feather to its cap by establishing new institute SSI when the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences was just 10 years old. So according to the girl who was with more than 12 years of experience, it's only second institute in India which is fully dedicated to the statistics and data science. Now coming to the second cycle of the inception. So then challenging phase started and the Herculean task of getting program structure and syllabus in place started. So on very next day, on a very happy morning, while discussing and brainstorming with Dean Academics, Dr. Bhama, she liked the idea of the girl naming and starting the applied statistics rather than just statistics program and suggested to take the guidance from Dr. Vidya ma'am. Thus, on 13th of April 2018, SIU circulated the notification about establishment of Symbiosis Statistical Institute. MSc admission procedure got underway, and on sideline, meeting with many industry experts and academic stalwarts, program structure and syllabus got shaped with help of all these people. As word got out via the Times of India's advertisement, which you can see here, on 9th of May, with one classroom and one computer lab and 23 students, we started the journey of excellence of SSI on 9th of July at ICC Tower. On 16th of July, we had our first induction program with help of Symbiosis School of Economics. Thus, my journey as a director started with holding hands of most remarkable visionaries, our own Honorable Chancellor, Sir, ever inspirational Dr. Vidya ma'am, every time leading with example, dynamic and very methodological VC ma'am, and very strong supporter, Dean ma'am, Dr. Jyoti. Along with statistics, holding hand of me, baby stepped into the way into the competitive field of statistical sciences. So moving ahead, with this, our major focus is to train the students to translate and apply statistical knowledge to solve the real-world problems in various interdisciplinary domains. So SSI has a strong foundation based on these 6 pillars, and then soon after the birth, within 4 years of SSI, conceived and explored the untapped talent and observed the enrollment from 23 students to 100 students. Every year, we have added very innovative pedagogy and practices with current PhD programs. Then we also do have UG program, which recently launched as per the NEP implementation, and the PG program, where we are offering 4 specialization. One is data science, another one is industrial statistics, third one is actuarial statistics, and fourth one is biostatistics. So every year, added very, very innovative pedagogy for implementation of these. Also with this, we do have 100% campus placement. SSI has provided a very trained statisticians and data scientists to many industries, and we do have very, very highly qualified star alumni sitting in the audience. So they are also getting higher package every year, and then our esteemed companies are very happy with the work which our students are working with industry. Moving ahead, obviously, as research and academics are no different, as I believe. So consistently, along with the partnership of many foreign universities, SSI is contributing in various research ideas. So when it comes to the internationalization, most of our internationalization happens with so many, universities. We do have very strong connect with many foreign universities. We also do have funded projects when it comes to the funding and the, implementing the research idea. We consistently got good amount of funding from Department of Science and Technology, ACRB, Matrix Grant, DBT, to name a few. So currently, all our faculty members are actually exploring new dimensions of all these research ideas. When it comes to the contribution from the faculty members, as this is very, very niche area, getting PhD faculty and involving them and getting them interested in this kind of things is really very amazing journey. So most of our members at SSI are also well connected with various other universities and academic institutes, being part of many academic committees. And SSI also signed a small contribution towards it. A couple of MOUs. One of them is with Harvard University, then Pune Knowledge Center, Clientha Research, to name a few. So with great initiatives towards popularizing statistics and statistical sciences, as domain is catching eyes of the non-statistician by ways of some of their, by ways of some of the very innovative ideas and best practices for the non-statistician community and the researcher. We have implemented successfully many best practices. One of them is Stats Buddy, where a student can connect with the statistical students, student from the statistical background. We also do have Sankhya platform where you can push any query. We implemented a couple of statistics clinic in a larger way, where objective is to bridge the gap between the researcher and the statistician. We also walk together, so statistical people, statistical students or students from statistical background walk together, they observe and they implement the ideas. So we also celebrate the Institute Research Day, and recently we started with the weekly series called Sankhya Shodh. So with this, let me thank all my faculty members and the students who have contributed in the building of the institute. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jyoti ma'am, and thank you, Sharvari ma'am. We are extremely proud that we have with us today Padma Vibhushan Shri Montek Singh Ahluwalia. He needs no introduction, especially for us who grew up in the 20th century. Montek Singh ji completed his bachelor's degree from St. Stephen's College in New Delhi and his MA and MPhil from Oxford University, where he was a Rhodes Scholar. He joined the World Bank in 1968, where he was the youngest division chief of the Income Distribution Division in the Development Research Center of the World Bank. After a decade, in 1979, he returned to India and had a distinguished career dedicated to the economic policies in India. And he has been a key figure in India's economic reforms since the 1980s. It is my proud privilege that it was during this time that Montek ji played a key role in setting up India's first independent multidisciplinary development research institute in Bombay, which was IGIDR. And I happened to be the recipient of my doctoral degree from IGIDR at its very first convocation in 1999. In 2004, Sir became the Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission of India, a position that he held for 10 years. During this time, he supervised the preparation of both the 11th and the 12th five-year plans for India. I would, in fact, here like to elaborate a little for our next generation that during the annual presentation of the Union Budget of 1991, he was holding the iconic budget briefcase when the then Finance Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, was preparing to present the Union Budget. And Sir holding that budget briefcase became symbolic of the Indian economic reforms of 1991. and he had even commented and he had commented that the size of the budget briefcase is inversely proportional to the size of the budget. So we can clearly see that despite his serious and challenging roles, Sir was equally well known for his immaculate wit and his sense of humor. And just a few minutes back, in fact, Dr. Vidya ma'am called him the rock star of economics of India. Dr. Vidya ma'am, may I please request you to felicitate Sir? Please join me in inviting our chief guest for the much-awaited session on the new reform paradigm for India at 2047. Sir, please.
No, this. Yeah. Well, Dr. Vidya Yeravdekar, Dr. Rajni Gupte, Dr. Jyoti Chandiramani, and Dr. Sharani Shukla, members of the faculty, and all the students being inducted in this induction program. Can I be heard? Is it coming through? Okay. Well, let me first thank you for honoring my late wife, Isha, in such a nice way. In fact, Vidya ji has actually offered to send me the slideshow, which I thought was very nice, so that I can share it with the whole family. So thank you very much. Let me also congratulate the Economic School for completing 16 years. You know, when I was much younger, they used to say you're 16 going on 17. I don't know, probably now they say you're 13 going on 14. But it is certainly an important landmark, and congratulations for all of you for having done so well and actually laid the groundwork for what I think, for all the students, will be a very productive period spent in symbiosis. Now, you know, I've been given a formidable subject, a new reform program, India at 2047. And nice references have been made to my involvement in the 1991 reforms. And you know, when you think about it, that's sort of 35 years ago. So I think anything that's 35 years old needs a change. So I think the idea that we need a new reform program is actually quite correct. Too much of the discussion about reforms, not only in our country, but actually everywhere, is as if the reforms were some defined list of things and you can just check off what you've done. The truth is, it's a shifting target because the world is changing. And if you look at what the world is now, or India and the world, it's massively different from what it was in 1991. So, you know, in 1991, frankly, we were simply undoing what I think now, and I thought then, were quite ridiculous constraints put on our private sector production firms. That was actually rather easy to do for the simple reason that there were so many restrictions that even if you blindly got rid of all of them, you couldn't have gone wrong. So actually that was a very easy period. Later on, we went on to move into creating the infrastructure which is necessary. I mean, you know, growth is not just held up because the government restricts activity. Growth is also held up if you fail to create the institutional and physical infrastructure needed for the country to take off. And that's much more difficult than just getting rid of restrictions. And we faced that for the past several years, and I think we made a fair amount of progress. But the time has come to recognize that we need a new agenda. So I wish people stop thinking about that was a reform we were supposed to do, we didn't do it, never mind. I think just scrap it all and look at the current situation and look ahead. Now I realize, I mean, we're a democracy, so, you know, looking back, there's always quarrelsome debates about what did you do right, what did we do wrong, etc., and so on. They're all relevant and they'll come up again. But for young people entering into university, those of you who are doing economic history should certainly look at all that, and there's a lot to learn. But those wondering what the future is going to hold, is best to start from scratch. So what is the starting from scratch amount to? I think first we must understand how much has changed. You know, first, India. I mean, remember, in 1991, India was a low-income, was in the category of what were called low-income countries. Thanks to the reforms of 1991, by 2001, I think it was Jim O'Neill from, I forget, Morgan Stanley or one of these companies, which identified 4 countries that were going to make a difference in the future. And they called them BRICS. So that was Brazil, that was Russia, that was India, and that was China. And then they added South Africa. Now, actually, China clearly was a correct choice because China did phenomenally well. We didn't do that well, but we did a lot better than we were doing earlier. So we also began to be taken a lot more seriously. Their judgment that Russia would be important was clearly wrong. It has lost importance. It remains a nuclear power, but it cannot be said to be a leading contributor to growth. And South Africa, I mean, has a lot of potential, but is currently in a complete mess. So the first thing about predictions is be very careful, be very watchful that some people are very bold in making projections, but long-term projections very often don't turn out to be right, but some of them do turn out to be right. You know, around about 2004 or 5, India crossed over from the rank of low-income countries and just flipped over into what were called middle-income countries. I won't go into what these cutoffs are. You can look it up in Wikipedia. And talking about Wikipedia, that's the big difference. I mean, when I came here, I think it was first came here in 94. You know, remember the internet, in the sense of a browser, only came in 1993. So in 1994, I would not have said, look it up. I mean, I would have worked hard and put it out. Today, nobody's interested in the details. If they're interested, they can look it up. So that's an example of how much change has occurred in this country. But I think in addition to us having become a middle-income country, we've actually changed in structure. Now, it's very important to distinguish between the size of GDP and a structural change. You know, a lot of people get very impressed by saying, this is the size of GDP. Let me put it to you this way. If India today had twice as many people and twice as much GDP, it would have the same per capita GDP. But as a size, it would already have become the 3rd largest or whatever it is country. After 3rd largest, it's a very long stretch, because then you've got China and the US. Getting to 3rd largest is just a little bit of expansion. But the point is that if our per capita income is the same, then the structure of the economy would not be different. You know, the percent of people who could afford this this or that or the other would be more or less the same. Technology would be the same. And that's not very interesting. What is interesting is when structure changes. And during this period, from 1991 to now, India's growth rate has accelerated quite a bit. It has had ups and downs depending on different, where you draw the cutoff. But like, for example, during the UPA period, the per capita growth rate averaged 6.8%. It was higher before the financial crisis, and then it slowed down. In the next 10 years, counting the present year at about 6.5%, the growth rate will be around 5.8%. Now, this is, of course, powerfully affected by the fact that you had the COVID pandemic, not only in India, but around the world. But still, the growth rate is lower than it was earlier, but we're hoping that we'll be able to get back to a higher level of growth. At the present, if we manage to grow, let's say at 6% or even 6.5%, since our population growth rate has now slowed down, and probably for the next 10 years, the average growth rate is more likely to be below 1%. And if the economy grows at 6.5%, which I think is not impossible, by the way, then the per capita growth rate of the economy will be 5.5% per year. Now, that's a huge per capita growth. Very few countries, except the miracle economies, have achieved that. So if we do that, I think that'll be terrific. But I'll come back to what the problems are in getting there, okay? So India has changed in structure. India has changed. The simplest change is the penetration of smartphones. The percent of people who now have smartphones has risen quite a bit, including in rural areas. Now, the problem is they're mainly using it for social messaging. This is not doing very much for productivity. It may actually even have a negative effect in certain dimensions. But there's a potential for using it to spread information, using it to get access to information, using it to expand financial transactions, using it to increase financial inclusion. So all kinds of possible upsides. But like all technology, changes in technology also bring downsides. It's not clear to me that a society blanketed with social media messaging, short, crisp little things which may or may not be true, is necessarily better off than not having this stuff and having to read a newspaper. Nowadays people, you find that in the old days when you went into a bus or a train or something, people would read a newspaper. Even outside a chaiwala's dukan, they would share a newspaper. The mental act of reading an article is very reassuring because somebody opens up a long article, read the whole thing, some application of mind. Today, young people, you find, are just glued onto their cell phone, and they're just getting short bits in tweets of one kind or another, and they're constantly changing. So that's a structural change. And by the way, it's affecting the way people, as it were, manage advertising. If you ever become an advertising executive, you will have to keep in mind that, the attention span is now down to about 2.5 seconds. And if you want to put a message across, it better be in 2.5 seconds. Longer messages get lost. You can multiply this in many ways. But one of the big impacts of the change in technology is really that we are in a world of much greater disruptive change. Now, there's always been disruptive change, and in fact, on one view, the only really interesting changes are disruptive changes. Schumpeter said the real power of capitalism was the power of destructive change. In fact, I have a small quarrel, therefore, with the slides you had about symbiosis, because you had a picture of students leading the world to a new equilibrium. Now, you know, I venture to suggest that in a world of rapidly changing technology, a new equilibrium is different from what you ought to characterize it. You know, in the old days, because change was not very frequent, you thought of equilibrium, and the equilibrium is shocked, and the role of economics is to judge how do you move from one equilibrium to the other equilibrium. And you had all kinds of, you learn all this in your, how does it happen, and so on. But you know, today, the name of the game is you won't reach equilibrium because you'll be shocked. The system will then move towards equilibrium. But you know, before you reach that equilibrium, there'll be another shock. Now, that is very difficult in the old technology. I mean, once you invented electricity, it made a huge difference, but it took 50 years for that to be absorbed. The problem with the modern technology, particularly digital technology, is that the dissipation time has now collapsed. And, you know, I forget what latest this, ChatGPT. ChatGPT reached 200 million users in 3 days. Now, that's unheard of. I mean, if you look at radio as being an early disruptive thing, it would have taken 50 years for radio to gain that sort of, and then television was more entertaining, but it still took 25 years. Email took this less than 25 years, but nothing has reached 200 million in 2 days. So I think, you know, for younger people entering into the world, and indeed for people organizing companies, I think it's very important to realize that the world is changing. And changing both unpredictably and also more rapidly. Recently in the newspapers, there was some announcement that some guys have discovered, they finally discovered something which may make fusion a reality. Now, I'm not a physicist, but my understanding is that fusion is the energy that's created not when an atom is disrupted, as in the case of fission, but when two small atoms are pushed together and made into one. And it has the immense advantage that it has no radiation, no damaging effect, no problem of how to get use of unused fossil fuel, etc., etc. And the problem until now has been that the energy needed to bring these two particles together was always greater than the energy it produced. So the action was a net energy loser. These guys have changed that. They now say that this action can be done in a manner which is a net energy gainer. Now, they say, well, look, we have to do lots more work, etc., etc. But scientists say that, hey, this might well be a major change. Now, look at the implications. If 20 years down the road, fusion actually becomes workable, everything you're doing on wind energy and solar energy will be completely unnecessary. And all the investment made in it will be superseded by this new technology. I'm not saying it's going to happen, and I'm not saying we shouldn't make it. But you know, when you're thinking ahead, I don't think we've ever had a situation where top managements have had to make a decision about a new technology, which in the last 5-6 years, because of the climate change issue, has been done for non-fossil fuel, clean fuel technology. We've never had a situation where people have said, this is the answer, and like within 3 or 4 years, somebody say, hang on a minute, it may be something totally different. And you're seeing the same thing happen in medical research. So our companies will have to live in a world where technological change is disruptive. Now, this has a lot of implications for how open are you to technology and how open are you to international movement. This invention, this is not going to happen just in India. In all probability, the major technological gains will be outside. Because first of all, they have hundreds of billions of dollars to spend. And secondly, all the brightest Indians are working there anyway. So if we want, I wouldn't be surprised at all that you'll find a lot of Indian scientists' name behind this breakthrough. But it's going to take place elsewhere. So we have to be open to this. So issue number one, if technology is changing, what do? Do you keep running an open economy in which you're constantly watching for what change is taking place and make sure you're ahead of the curve? Now that's openness. But you know, the current changes in the world, I'm not talking about India alone, the world, seem to be in an opposite direction. Because in the 1990s, the proposition that global integration was the way to get general prosperity was being strongly pushed by industrial countries, led by the United States, and that was the sort of broad framework within which policy was made everywhere. And people in India resented that, and we were often accused of having opened up, you know, this is another East India Company problem, blah, blah, blah. We shouldn't allow this, but of course that most people realized that we had a lot to gain, and we demonstrated. Because India did better after 1991 than it had ever done before. And there should be nobody who has any doubts on this score. And secondly, I mean, our status in the world gained. It's not the case that we became unimportant. Actually, we became more important. And furthermore, our share of world trade increased, especially if you include services. Now, there's a lot of focus these days that, yeah, services, okay, but you know, what about goods? That manufacturing is the big narrative. If you're not doing well in manufacturing, the perception is that you've somehow done something wrong. You know, this also fails to realize that manufacturing itself is being unbundled into production of commodities, assembling of commodities, the service component. Now, if you look at an iPhone, for example, you know, the proportion of an iPhone cost that is accounted for by the physical components, that's what manufacturing is actually not all that great. If you count the chips, that's a lot, but the value of the chips includes the value of chip design. It's not just the silicon wafer, it's the chip design. And India is involved in a lot of chip design work. You know, I forget the numbers, but there are, God knows, 20, 30,000 engineers working on world-class chip design in Bangalore. Maybe there are some in Pune also. I shouldn't give all the credit to Bangalore. Maybe there are some in Pune. And you know, this is not counted as if we've done manufacturing. So if a company abroad does the research and says, this is the kind of chip we want to design, and assigns that work to a research subsidiary in Bangalore, a wholly owned subsidiary, all Indian skills. And these guys then design the chip, which they send back. And that design is engraved onto the chip by some factory, whatever, Taiwan or in South Korea or something. And that is not called part of Indian manufacturing. Although what we get, the income we get is treated as service exports. Now, it's as if you were just being a waiter or something like that. Service is low quality. It's not. We need to work out internationally what I said earlier, that, you know, earlier I think the world believed in Vasudeva Kutumbakam, which is our slogan. You know, it doesn't matter where the thing is produced, you're a company, you outsource it, it's part of the world. Now, actually, that implied openness, globalization, this, that, and the other. Unfortunately, the United States itself has walked back on that. in my view, a matter of great regret. But a lot of that walking back is not because of economic protectionism, but because they feel threatened in terms of security. And the important point is the US had a huge share in world GDP, which then slowly came down as everybody else's share increased. This was expected. The difference is that the Chinese gained a massive part of the trade possibility, others didn't. That's mainly our fault. I mean, had we followed policies that allowed us to benefit, we would have done better, the Chinese would have done less, the US would have been where it is, but it wouldn't have been threatened by any one country. Thanks to developing countries not being willing to take up these opportunities and give credit to China for actually being willing to do so, they have really shot ahead. And they've immediately, the US sees them as a threat. And this is really in the debate in the United States on the security side. They are concerned at the rise of China not just as an economic partner. They are concerned because the Chinese officially say that we want to challenge your ideology, your military role, and also your technological role. And there are many statements by the Chinese president saying so. So that means that in the United States side, there's a massive effort that, look, we must isolate China, not from everything, but from these technical things. And technical things includes chips. Because Industry 4.0, digitalization and all this stuff, depends critically on chips. And that's the technology that makes all this possible. So the US view is that, look, we don't want China to be able to dominate. They are not actually dominating. Who is dominating is really Taiwan. Taiwan, we have no political problem with, but China is right next to Taiwan. And there's a lot of noise that, the Chinese may well want to make a preemptive claim on Taiwan because they do regard Taiwan as part of China. As a matter of fact, the rest of the world also takes the same view. So these are the things that have caused concern. And now the question is, what should we do? Now, there are really two very different ways in which we can react. Okay? One is to say that, globalization is all over. That was yesterday's party. We got to move with the times. And the times are no longer for openness, so we must close down, build up everything within, etc., etc. The other view, and that's the view I think is correct, is that we are faced with a situation where the Chinese challenge to the United States has led the United States to react to protect its own security primacy, okay? And therefore, they have a vested interest in creating a China plus one, opening a window for other countries to come in so that their supply chains can be spread around the world, but without having to be dependent on China. I don't think the United States will do some totally kind of internal production, and they're rich enough to afford it. But by and large, they want a supply chain not dependent on China. And the question is, if we want to benefit from that, what should we do? Now here, the debate is wide open at the moment, though it's not being emphasized. There are people who say that, look, we should erect suitable walls and strengthen ourselves. And there are others who say that, we really need to integrate with a new global supply chain. Now, integrating with a global supply chain means we should find those areas in the supply chain where we are a credible, competitive producer and tell everybody that, listen, if you're willing to work with us in this area, we're quite willing to import what is needed from other fellows who are more competitive. So that means openness. But it also means certainty. I mean, you can't start this, and then suddenly somebody says, no, it's about time, too much imports from outside, It's about time we develop internally. I think people will always judge what's the rationale of our policy, because they'll want to know that if this is the rationale of our policy, then they can more predictably say how policy will move. And I think this is it's a bit complex, and certainly I think too complex at an undergraduate level. So I really compliment and admire the teachers who have to explain all this to kids. I mean, in the old days, trade theory was very easy. You know, Ricardo, this country produces wheat, that country produces wine, so you send wheat here, you bring wine from it. It's very easy. This is becoming much, much more complicated. And what is more is that on their WhatsApp, they are getting multiple essays from the WhatsApp University, each of about 15 words, each pulling in different directions. So good luck to you to explain all this to everybody. But what I'm saying to the students is, I think we need to keep our minds open. The truth of the matter is that it's very difficult to know what is the right policy to follow. And what you think is the right policy today may not be the right policy tomorrow if something dramatic changes. So you need flexibility. And I think that in order to do that, you need very strong debate amongst all sides. I mean, one should have a situation where people are saying, I don't agree with this because of this, and somebody else saying, no, you're quite wrong. And for the following reason, we should adopt a different approach. Let me give you one or two other examples, because I think we are running badly out of time. Am I okay? All right. Two other examples. Until today, or until recently, I thought one of the big achievements of the 91 reforms was the sanctification of the belief that in a competitive economy, private sector through competition will produce more efficient outcomes, and the public sector is psychologically not geared to competing. You know, the public sector can be geared to delivering a well-defined product. I mean, for example, even in India, after a few hiccups, vaccinating, 1.2 billion people is a clear target. Achieving that was a great credit, both to the central government and the state governments, because the state governments are the ones that actually did it. So there are things which are very clear, which are unidimensional, and you just tell the public sector, look, this is what you've got to do, and they do it. But you know, when it comes to making choices, this technology, that technology, they're hopeless. And the other thing is that the public sector is driven by process. In the public sector, you are never going to be judged by whether what you did worked. You are going to be judged by whether you violated any process, even if it worked. Now, you know, people keep complaining that public sector guys are very hesitant to make decisions, etc. I think it's not fair, because if a civil servant is being told, let's put it this way, if you followed the procedure specified correctly and the patient died, that's fine. And you will never be held responsible. If, on the other hand, you violated all three procedures and the patient survived, you could still be held liable. How come you did this? And the argument would be that if you hadn't done it, the patient would have been in even better condition. Okay? I'm just using a medical analogy, but I think you're a medical person. You can translate this across the board. So I think until now, the feeling was that the private sector, give the private sector as much play as possible and don't bother too much about the public sector. Frankly, our view was, and several governments said it in various wishy-washy ways, that, you know, except in critical areas, you should privatize existing public sector. I mean, the first reform government never said it. They were a coalition. Left was very strong. But subsequently, in the United Front, Vajpayee's government, they all said that, but it didn't get done. And even now hasn't been done because, we still haven't got around to it because politically, there's a very, very strong feeling, right or wrong, but there is a strong feeling that privatization of the public sector is bad. It's very interesting. There is no feeling against letting the private sector compete. So, for example, the strategy we followed in airlines was to allow the private sector to come in. They competed the hell against Air India. Air India's share collapsed. It's only after it went totally bust that we were willing to sell it. So we are actually quite willing, or have been, I'm not talking about this government, all governments, we're quite willing to see a sector privatized. The same thing with banking. We haven't yet privatized a public sector bank, although we've talked about it for many years, okay? But the share of private sector banking in bank has increased massively. And, Nandan Nilekani frequently used to say that in another 5 or 6 years, it'll be beyond 50%. So willingness to let the sector be privatized, not willing to let any bank be privatized. I think we have to ask ourselves, looking ahead, can this prejudice be allowed to continue, or are we going to do something different? And the critical, for example, look, we still have public sector hotels. What on earth is the justification for a public sector hotel? I don't remember in my entire period when I had something to do with the government and we were inviting guests. The main thing they were saying was, are you going to put us up in a public sector hotel or a private sector? I don't remember a single person saying, no, I want to go into a public sector hotel, but we have privatized one or two. But the one or two we privatized got caught up in a controversy. So as a result, dead stop over there. I think we need to be clear that, look, let's not just talk about the public sector, let's talk about, say, state governments. One of the biggest problems we face is that the distribution companies in almost all states are dysfunctional and make huge losses. Now, whenever I met chief ministers, I would say that, look, why don't you, and by the way, we do have private distribution companies. Surat is private, Bombay is private, and so on. Hey, why don't you privatize, if you don't want to privatize the whole distribution company, why don't you privatize distribution companies in some areas and see how they perform? I think we need, when we talk about a new reform agenda, we really need to do this. At the moment, and this is my last point, one of the big changes is climate change. In 1991, as that was not an issue, the Rio conference, the UNFCCC was set up and so on, was in 1992. That's the first time that at least an intergovernmental group began thinking about climate change, okay? Today, it is very clear that we have to get out of coal. Prime Minister has himself said net zero by 2070. If you're going to be net zero by 2070, then sooner or later, maybe a few years later, production of thermal energy has to start coming down. That's going to be a huge expansion in renewable energy. All of this now is going to take place in the private sector, not in the public sector. Now, in the private sector, if someone, and they're doing a lot, the technical capacity of the private sector to set up both solar and wind energy farms is undoubted. I believe I was being told by Mashelka over breakfast that Reliance is setting up one of the biggest solar plants in Gujarat, and it's going to be massive, okay? So we have the capacity, we have the technology, we have the managerial capacity, blah, blah, blah. But if you set up solar power generators in the private sector, and they have to sell to distribution companies that are broke, sooner or later they're going to say this is a losing game. And today, this problem is finessed because the government has set up the Solar Energy Corporation of India, a subsidiary of one of our PSUs, and they actually sign the PPAs, and they offload the PPAs to state government. So as far as the producer is concerned, he's actually selling to a central government entity, and the central government entity is unbundling that onto state governments, okay? But you know, if the state government distribution companies actually broke and these bills mount, it just means that the burden will fall on the central government. Now, maybe the central government has some pressure to persuade state governments to pay up, but state governments have their own financial problems. So, you know, fixing the distribution system is, in my view, absolutely the top reform that we should do. And, you know, the central government has been trying to do that since 2001. I was involved in the first two failed efforts. We put together a program in which the state said, if you give us money, we'll do this. They never did it. Then there have been two subsequent programs which are still working. The last one will finish next year. But I don't think there's adequate progress in those areas. So that's a new area that we really have to look at. So, you know, one could go on and on. I think one critical aspect of weakness which has emerged is in the ability to deliver inclusive growth, by which you really mean good quality education, good healthcare. We are making progress, there's no doubt about it. But I don't think we are making progress at the rate we need to if the idea is to become something close to a developed country by 2047. You know, everybody seems to be now agreed that let's transform that 2047 developed country, if you like, slogan into can we grow at an average of 7 or 7.5% between now and 2047. Now, we did grow close to that for about 4 or 5 years, but not for a long period. And what is worse is that in the years ahead, most people think that the world growth rate will slow down. So if we are to be growing faster, when we grew rapidly, the world was growing rapidly. For us to grow even faster than we did before, when the world has slowed down, it requires a lot of very bold steps. And some of the things that I've been talking about give an indication of the kind of bold steps that we need. And the biggest of them is really having a realization that, you know, both the central government and the state government have limited fiscal capacity. One of the problems we have is that whenever you have a discussion on education, everybody says, oh, we must increase the money on education by whatever, 1% or 2% of GDP. Whenever you have a discussion on health, they say, but of course, you are supposed to increase the expenditure on health by another 1% of GDP. If you look at our security situation, we certainly need to expand our defense expenditure by 0.5% of GDP. If you look at technology change, everybody says that the Indian government should spend another 1% on GDP, particularly in agriculture and R&D. Now that's about, 4 or 5% of GDP, but at the same time, people also say that the fiscal deficit should be reduced by somewhere between 3 and 4% of GDP for the center and states combined. Now, to spend 5% more and reduce the fiscal deficit requires one of two things: either a massive increase in tax revenue or big cuts in existing unproductive expenditure. There's no political agreement that I'm aware of what expenditures should be cut down. There is a complete political agreement on what expenditures should be increased. But if a government behaves responsibly and doesn't expand the fiscal deficit, this will only mean less investment, squeezing out of productive expenditure, slowing down of the economy. So I think the economic debate should now focus on all these things and raise the difficult issues so that everybody is aware that this is what we need. I mean, take, for example, climate change. Should we or should we not have a carbon tax? Because coal is the most polluting of all fuels, and Economics 101 will tell you that if the price of coal does not reflect the negative effects of pollution, both on global warming and on local air pollution, you should impose a carbon tax. Now, one great advantage of imposing a carbon tax, it will also raise a lot of revenue to help people who need help, do adaptation, et cetera, et cetera. I think we should have a global, not a global, an internal Indian debate. Should we have a carbon tax or no? And frankly, to make our dream of decarbonization a reality, it is when the debate focuses on these things that we are making progress. Otherwise, we are just endorsing good slogans like we must be clean, we must do this, that, and the other, but not actually addressing the things that are difficult. Well, I could go on and on, but I don't think you've invited me in order to abolish your lunch. So let me thank you for listening so patiently, and happy to take questions if there are any. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir, for such insightful talk, which again has made us believe that we need to look back at economic history and ponder upon the Hayek versus Friedman and Hayek versus Keynes debate. And given the strategic planning on our plates, the kind of talk and the kind of advice that you have given us will definitely help us to design the plans and strategies for the government. With your permission, may I please invite the students to take questions, please, sir? The students are allowed to ask questions. Please raise your hands. You will be given the opportunity. Oli Priya. Can I please have the mics? Yeah. Please introduce yourself and then.
I'm Olipriya Chakraborty from BSc second year, BSc Economics second year. So how is technology disrupting the economic landscape, and especially in the world of finance, and how does India fit into this narrative?
How is technology usurping the landscape? Changing.
Changing.
Well, I mean, digital technology, for example, AI and all these other things, from all we hear, many things that currently are done with the use of a lot of labor will actually get done by the computer. So that will obviously displace certain kinds of jobs. The positive side, and this has been the case with technology all the time, that while it displaces some jobs, it creates new jobs. The worst thing you can do, in my view, is to fight the technology. Whereas the political process all over the world tries to fight the technology. I mean, that is what Luddites used to do. Smash the textile machineries because that was causing unemployment, not realizing that they were generating new jobs. But if you were a politician, it's not very easy to say to a whole group of people that, look, I'm sorry, I know you're going to lose jobs, but don't worry, we are creating new ones. That's why it's very important to have rapid growth. Because, if rapid growth takes place, then new jobs are always being created, and people will find these new jobs. You don't have to give each guy a new job, because let him do a bit of a search. I'll tell you a very nice story going back. It's in my book. When Manmohan Singh was finance minister, and we were trying to introduce computerization in the banks. All had the same view. No computerization in banks because it leads to a loss of jobs. So they spent about an hour with the finance minister, who very patient, he's a professor in economics himself, so he patiently explained to them, etc., etc. And being a polite sort of guy, when they were leaving, he walked across to his own office door, opened it, and sort of wanted to shake hands with each of them. So they all shook hands with him as they left, and one of them, I remember, I was there, said to him, "Mr. Finance Minister, he was saying, look, new jobs will be created. So don't think that labor will lose." And he even said that we will not fire anybody. In other words, but then they said, no, you won't fire anybody, but you won't hire. And he said, look, there'll be new jobs created, so why are you worried? One of them went and said, "Mr. Finance Minister, I completely disagree with you. But," and this was important, he said, "but I don't mind admitting, my son agrees with you." So, people change as societies change, and younger generation views get fed up through the family to senior people who may or may not change their own position, but deep down they know. I think we have to recognize that this change is unavoidable. It's very tough to be a politician and sell this change, but that's the issue. Well, even today, for example, there's a lot of criticism that, we are supporting startups, but startups are really high-end technology, well-educated guys. Instead of supporting startups, why don't we give the same amount of money to MSMEs, who are less skilled, low-educated guys? Now, there's a real choice there. I mean, of course, any government will say we're going to do both. And they will do both, but over time, the long-term impact of supporting MSMEs with a little bit more money is going to be negligible. The long-term impact of supporting startups that might be disruptive, and this is the key. If they're not disruptive, they're not worth it. That's huge. Take diagnostics, if nothing else. I mean, there are all kinds of things that have been developed which will allow remote diagnostic work to be done without a person in the rural area having to go all the way to get tested. I mean, it's very difficult to do a blood test if you have to go to somewhere where there's a laboratory. But now they have things which, through your smartphone or whatever, it can measure things, and you get an analysis. This will lower the jobs of technicians in laboratories, but it will lead to many, many new things happening. That's just one example, actually.
Tejal and Dhruti. Yeah, you want? Oh, your style. Thank you. It's working?
They should send
Just
you
check.
the questions, then
It's
you
not
can
working.
just tell me. Why don't you come forward?
Hello. A very good afternoon, sir. It was a pleasure and honor listening to you. My question is to you is that what is preventing India from entering into a recession in this global turndown? And will there be any potential risk of an upcoming recession in India?
Well, it's a very good question. I mean, I think we're very far from a recession. I mean, technical definition of a recession is negative growth in 2 quarters. And I don't think India's own internal economic demand will grow sufficiently rapidly. Our danger is not a recession. Our danger is that growth may slow down. And this is the real question. I mean, we used to think for a long time that if you want to create growth of jobs, okay, you need to have a growth rate of about 7.5%. If the growth slips to 5%, it's still growth, but with the structural changes and productivity changes taking place, that will not generate nearly enough jobs. And I think that's still true, okay? So I think our danger is not recession. Our danger is slipping into a growth rate which will be unacceptable and will generate social tension. I mean, if young people become unemployed, they can be very easily misdirected, do all kinds of things, etc., etc. So that is the real problem, I think, you know.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Sejal.
Hi.
So it was an honor listening to you. My question to you is, sir, as you've rightly mentioned, that India has been making impressive economic progress in the recent years, but the biggest economies of the world, namely China and USA, they still have a much larger GDP than India. Where do you think, sir, India is lacking?
Well, you know, the USA had a large GDP forever. So the growth rate of the USA has not been that fantastic, okay? China was not very different from us in per capita terms by about 1990. But they did very dramatic reforms compared to us, okay? And they began their reforms earlier, they did it more dramatically, they opened up the economy much earlier, and they benefited from the growth that took place in world trade, which we missed out on. You know, I think China is now 5 times our per capita GDP, okay? And the United States, multiple. I don't think we should be posing an unrealistic question like, when are we going to get to China's GDP? There's no point talking about the US. When are we going to get to China's GDP per capita? It's going to take a very long time. Generally, people think that India is about 20 years behind China. This means that if China didn't grow at all, okay, and maybe India could get close to their per capita GDP in 20 years. But that's if we do all the things right. And many of the questions I posed, we have to ask those questions. You know, are we willing to make these dramatic changes, or are we going to be stuck where we are because X is too difficult, Y is too political, something else is too sensitive, and so on. So it's not as if these things are not known. But you know, what I would feel happier about is that, you know, if a bunch of students from Symbiosis or other universities were addressing politicians during, for example, the coming general election, if they were posed to them specific questions, are you in favor of, I don't know, privatizing or no? Are you in favor of a carbon tax or no? Otherwise, if you just say, are you in favor of improving the quality of education? Everybody will say yes. You know, I like, very often when I give lectures to students, I like to think that policy can be partitioned into 4 layers, okay? The first layer is a slogan. That's not, don't knock it, because slogans can drive ambition and can generate public support. So it's very important. And you know, we've had slogans, Garibi Hatao, then we had inclusive growth, now we have Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. They're more or less the same thing. All slogans, by and large, there are very few slogans I can think of where you would get up and say, I don't agree with that, okay? The second question is, beyond the slogan, what's your target? I mean, for example, if the slogan is, let's say we should become a developed country by some date, that's a good slogan. And then somebody says, what's your target? And the person says, my target is 9% growth. Then you are able to ask yourself, ask them that, look, the best that India ever achieved, which is between 2004 and 2010, was something like 8%. And the average during UPA was only about 6.8 or something like that. And the average during the present regime is 5.8. So why do you think you're going to get 9%? What is it that you're going to do which will make that difference? To which some answers will come. So I think you need to go from slogans to targets, and then those targets that get translated into either programs or policies. Now, give you an example. Somebody says, what's your target? And I said, well, it's improving the quality of education. So then what's the program? One program could be, I'm going to increase the expenditure on all public universities, in which case you have to ask the question, where's the money coming from? Another view could be, I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to open up private universities, okay? Well, that's a policy, and very often, I mean, that has been done, and you are a living example of how that policy works. I'm sure there are hundreds of things we should have done better, but at least you're discussing a policy. But you know, if you pose this question, are you in favor of more private universities or not? Then it forces the politician to decide. I mean, does he want to say yes or does he want to say no? And that improves the quality of debate, I think.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. Please.
Sir, I found it really interesting when you talked about China and what is US's policy going to be, especially in terms of chip manufacturing. And that reminds me of a very foundational problem, which is that sometimes a policy might have amazing economic benefits, but from a long-term national security perspective, it might be harmful. For example, in 1991, there was a huge debate over if letting in foreign direct investments in India will lead to some sort of a security breach. So, sir, in such a scenario, as a policymaker, how do you decide if the economic consideration is outweighing the security one, or if the security consideration is outweighing the economic one?
I don't think at that time the argument was not security. The argument was economic. And I think the answer to that, in my view, is very clear. We have benefited from foreign direct investment. It is not that we have benefited because the fellows who invested, foreigners who invested benefited. Indian industry also benefited. The Indian industry rose to the challenge and proved that it was competitive. So that debate, in my view, although it was there, if you like, the reformers have won. Now, when you come to security, that's a more interesting debate. Like, for example, I would because we are not, it's not a secret, but our relationship with China is troubled. And, you know, we keep having these discussions. Let's hope they go well. But I would certainly say that, you know, the threat of cyber security has to be given the topmost attention. Because if you can penetrate either through the internet, penetrate your banking system, your financial system, your railway system, your flight system, etc., I mean, the results would be disastrous, okay? So you have to decide, what does that mean? And maybe it means that, you know, you need complete assurance on the kind of chips that are used there. So you find a mechanism to do that. But that doesn't mean that chips have to be, all the chips have to be produced domestically. I mean, if you're importing the chips from Denmark, is that a security threat? If you're importing them from the US, is there a security threat? Certainly, if they are Chinese-produced chips, people would have their doubts, okay? So you need to get into that in some detail and operate on that basis.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure the students would have a lot of questions, but I'm sorry to say that we are running out of time. There would be no more questions further. And thank you so much, sir, for answering all the questions so patiently and confirming our belief that change is the only constant thing that we can incorporate. Thank you so much. And now I would request Dr. Sharbari ma'am to please come for the vote of thanks.
So respected dignitaries on the dais, off the dais, it gives me immense pleasure and I feel really honored to have each one of you today with us to grace this particular occasion. Though our Honorable Chancellor, Sir Professor S.B. Muzumdar, could not make it today, but all his blessings are with us and I'm very sure that he is looking forward to meet you all. So Montek Singh ji, your talk on a new reform paradigm, India at 2047, was really thought-provoking and received well. I'm very confident that all new joined students will use this knowledge which you have imparted during the session and will be useful during their academic journey. I feel that it will be very, little injustice if I try to summarize Sir's talk and thoughts in 1 minute. So this is the first time, sir, we are meeting in person. However, Montek Singh ji, I do have 2 letters signed by you, where we have submitted the reports to the ILC for comparing the policies of LMIC related to the aging. So I feel very honored that to meet you in person today. Moving forward, Dr. Vidya ma'am, you always guiding us on various institutional matters and real inspiration to each one of us across SIU. Thank you, ma'am, for always being there and for us giving us the ground to explore various opportunities in academic domain. So our own Vice Chancellor, ma'am, Rajni Gupte, we need someone when you wish to, throw out some of the, energy and then you want to share some of the ideas. So you always being there whenever we need you. And today I grabbed the, again, opportunity to interact with you. So you being there with all, single occasions, thanks for all your advice to the newly joined student. So I'm afraid that today whether I would be able to, enoughly thank our own Dean Madam. She is there right from the very first day of SSI, hand-holding all of us during the journey of 5 years at SSI, when we started with 2 staff members, 1 director and another attendant. So she bared a lot of load and hand-holded us in all the matters. So special thanks, ma'am, for giving me this opportunity to be with many stalwarts and with the extended family members on my birthday today. So this is the 3rd time Dr. Jyoti madam has given me this kind of opportunity to be with all of you on my birthday. So thank you so much. So all invited, thank you. So all invitees and well-wishers who are today with us to grace this occasion and join us for celebrating for this particular celebration, I thank each one of you. I'm actually thankful to all the Symbiosis School of Economics and Symbiosis Statistical Institute staff members, colleagues, for contributing towards the institutional growth. Without your support, this journey will be wouldn't be very smooth. I always feel that institute comes first and then individual. If institute grows, individual growth is assured. But if individual contributes limited, then institute growth will be limited. So myself and Dr. Jyoti ma'am, looking forward to have your more innovative ideas and contribution towards the institutional growth at SSE and SSI. Our fantastic IT team, all admin staff members, along with Mr. Gadeji, who always support us for the, from the back end for this auditorium arrangement. We thank you all. So all SSE and SSI newly joined student, I wish you best wishes on this particular occasion, and I'm confident that your journey towards interpreting uncertainty, which is our hashtag at SSI, will be really enjoyable. And as Sir has mentioned, keep your mind open in the digital era. So most remarkable thing I feel that you will learn here to dream big. So with this, thank you all. Best wishes. Thank you.